They assumed it was nothing more than another piece of cosmic gravel, an icy, dust-smeared fragment drifting in from the outskirts of the galaxy. Cold, unremarkable. One more relic tossed into our solar neighborhood and destined to be catalogued, studied, and forgotten. But 3i Atlas refused to fit that simple story. Its path bent in ways that puzzled orbital dynamics. Its internal emissions beat with an odd, regular cadence. And when the James Webb Space Telescope trained its piercing infrared eyes on the object, what returned shattered the comfortable categories we use to understand the sky. Beneath the weathered exterior of that wandering body, hidden under layers of frozen detritus, lay geometry, deliberate, repeating, precise. Not the jagged, chaotic forms of mineral growth or the organic fractals of natural erosion, but grids and angles, corridors and cavities spaced at intervals that screamed of planning. Webb did not simply catch stray light. It exposed an internal plan. Thermal maps revealed structures laid out with the sort of order any city planner would recognize. Modular blocks, repeating units, right angles where none should exist. For the first time in recorded human history, a telescope returned an image of something inside an interstellar object that looked unmistakably engineered. At first, 3i Atlas lived in the footnotes, catalogued as the third known interstellar visitor to pass through our sun's neighborhood. It moved along a track that was odd but not extraordinary enough to demand immediate action. Slight deviations, minute anomalies, nothing catastrophic. Then Webb turned its instruments toward the visitor, and everything changed. NIRCam and MIRI didn't return the expected modeled heat signature of a dormant chunk of ice and rock. Instead, they traced outlines too regular, too consistent to be chance. Long, narrow passages, perpendicular intersections, enclosed voids repeating like modules in a manufacturing blueprint. Those thermal contours aligned with an unmistakable logic, not geology, but layout. Not decay, but design. Skeptics at first blamed sensors, calibration quirks, and data artifacts. But as scans accumulated and independent instruments confirmed what Webb saw, doubt gave way to a reluctant acceptance. The internal geometry had proportions and spatial relationships that resembled urban planning. Imagine a small city block compressed and preserved inside an interstellar slug of ice, its streets replaced by corridors, its plazas replaced by cavities. Modules repeated as if a single architectural vocabulary had been applied across compartments. In nature, nothing arranges itself into repeating right angles with such stubborn persistence. Intelligence does. The thermal story was where the implications deepened into something even darker and more exhilarating. Heat in 3i Atlas did not leak uniformly. It pulsed from distinct zones, each aligned with a structural grid. Those were not passive hotspots left over from formation. They were localized timed emissions, behaving more like active temperature control systems than random decay. Picture an abandoned complex where certain rooms remain warm, maintained by unseen infrastructure. Not dead, simply unattended. Webb sensors recorded fluctuations that matched patterns we would call controlled thermal regulation. On-off cycles, modulation, regular intervals. This heat, coupled with curious electromagnetic behavior around the object, led some engineers to a disturbing hypothesis. Those internal cavities might be shielded. Certain frequencies were reflected entirely. Others passed in but did not return, as if absorbed and stored, perhaps processed. When you start to see grid-aligned, temperature-regulated, signal-blocking cavities inside a traveling rock, the simplest label of rock no longer fits. The only logical alternative is that those cavities serve a purpose. If the purpose is survival, conservation, or functionality in the harshness of deep space, then we may not be observing a relic at all. We may be watching a vessel. To make sense of the anomaly, researchers hunted for analogs among human designs: subterranean refuges, nuclear shelters, orbital habitats. The comparisons were unsettling. The internal layout shared characteristics, with some of the most efficient human structures optimized for long-term endurance. Hexagonal chambers suggested strength and space efficiency, the kind of shapes aerospace engineers favor. Other segments displayed spacing that matched Fibonacci ratios, patterns both organic and optimized for material efficiency. An ESA physicist posited that the architecture suggested environmental compartmentalization, a design intended to isolate life or sensitive equipment from the lethal vacuum and radiation of interstellar travel. The idea emerged that this could be a lifeboat, a fragment of a larger construct, perhaps a station, a colony ship, or an ark meant not to explore but to survive. If so, why is it here now in our time? Is its appearance accidental? Is it following a fixed course? Or did it home in on our system because of us? If 3I Atlas was engineered to ferry life, then its arrival is not merely an astronomical event. It is a message. The presence of a city-like interior forces a reframing of the encounter. What looks like an object could instead be a beacon, a probe, or an artifact intentionally set adrift. We are left to ask the frightening questions. Who built this? For what purpose? And did it come here of its own accord, or because something or someone aimed it at us? As Webb's images spread through scientific networks, the reaction inside the professional community was not uniform. Some prominent astrophysicists refused to speak on record. Others chose measured phrases: unexpected, unprecedented, statistically improbable. Behind the cautious language sat something less scientific: fear. The admission that we had photographed city-like engineered spaces inside an interstellar object would rupture dense layers of consensus. It would mean technological architectural intelligence existed beyond Earth and had the means to project its artifacts across starfields. For many, that leap was too radical to declare publicly. Not everyone chose silence. Defense assets designed for terrestrial threats began to track the object. Thermal imagers, radio frequency monitors, and deep space interference sensors, systems usually engaged for missile detection or anti-satellite defense, pivoted toward the visitor. Those systems recorded things ordinary telescopes did not: a rotation pattern that appeared non-natural, thermal zones blinking with fixed periodicity, and subtle mass redistributions that suggested moving mass beneath the surface. Leaks inside those agencies hinted at a most unsettling reading: a faint rhythmic gravitational fluctuation. Not radio, not heat, but a pulsed modulation in gravitational signatures, as if something massive inside was changing position or using gravity itself as a form of signaling. Suddenly, the military gaze had shifted from passive observation to active monitoring of a potential device. In a confidential collaboration between astrophysicists and AI specialists, Webb's multispectral scans were fed into an advanced spatial interpreter, an AI trained to reconstruct volumetric architecture from noisy, remote sensing. The output was more than a schematic. It was an architectural rendering, layered and detailed. Multiple strata emerged: transit corridors, heat exchange conduits, energy nodes, storage cavities. The model painted a picture of a self-contained biosphere, or at least an engineered environment designed to preserve structure and possibly function across eons and distances. One chilling note: several researchers observed that the dimensions and passage shapes would be ill-suited to human bodies. Turns were too tight, vertical transitions too compressed. Whatever was intended to traverse those halls was not built like us. Movement inside might not have been bipedal or even biological in the ways we understand. When such evidence migrates from the lab into classified briefings, the world shifts quietly. Leaks from space agencies, private contractors, and diplomatic channels reveal the scope of the reaction. Orbital platforms repositioned for constant surveillance. AI deep space trackers repurposed. Institutions clamping down on data release. The European Space Agency abruptly limited public logs. Governments moved to control the flow of information. The concern was not strictly that the object was real. It was that the social consequences of admitting the truth were unpredictable. What occurs when religious frameworks, political structures, and scientific orthodoxy are forced to contend with incontrovertible artifacts of intelligence? How does the public process the knowledge that complex architecture and possibly purposeful design exist beyond our world? Curiously, the discovery prompted scholars to re-examine the past. Historians and anthropologists began drawing tenuous but riveting parallels between the object's geometry and motifs, found in ancient mythologies. Some indigenous star maps depict circular arrangements in the heavens. Sumerian tablets reference chariots of the sky surrounded by vaulted halls. Egyptian architects encoded particular proportions into pyramid designs. Thermal node placements inside 3I Atlas suggested ratios echoing the golden mean, a ratio recurrent in ancient monuments. Are these coincidences? Or could ancient peoples have witnessed similar encounters, recorded them in ritual and myth, and encoded those encounters into architecture and legend? The idea is delicate and speculative, yet it offers an unsettling possibility. This might not be a first contact, but a continuation of contact across deep time. The most decisive shift came not from interpretation, but from motion. Webb's ultrasensitive instruments, recalibrated to detect infinitesimal angular changes, registered a movement. A chamber shifted by 0.02 degrees. Insignificant by cosmic measures, enormous in mechanical terms. A door eased, a mechanism realigned. The shift coincided with a solar flare that bathed the object in a surge of electromagnetic energy. Could the structure be sun-reactive, designed to awaken when encountering stellar radiation? One hypothesis suggested a hibernation protocol, an engineered dormancy that reactivates when exposed to a viable star system. If the system is reactive, then our star may have functioned as an activation key. The movement implied, dormancy does not mean death. Whatever was inside might be slumbering, but it is capable of response. With the discovery reaching decision-makers, long-dormant frameworks resurfaced. The United Nations Protocols for Contact with Extraterrestrial Intelligence, drafted decades ago, reappeared on the table. Those documents outline principles and responses for undeniable evidence of non-Earth intelligence. But 3I Atlas did not broadcast messages in any conventional sense. It did not speak. Yet the geometry, thermal modulation, shielding behavior, and now mechanical activity push us to broaden our definition of communication. A moving mechanism, a timed pulse, a design that interfaces with a star. Might these be forms of intentionality? If so, then by existing protocols we have entered a state of contact, however asymmetrical. And every probe we send, every radio we transmit, every deep scan becomes not just an investigation, but a reply. We cannot assume neutrality. We can only wonder who, if anyone, is listening. As the world held its breath, some scientists proposed a more radical model. Perhaps the object does not host biological life or conventional machinery, but something else entirely. Consciousness encoded into structure, algorithms transmitted through geometry, information embedded in gravitational patterns or quantum arrangements. Imagine intelligence that is not seated in neurons or silicon chips, but woven into the fabric of configuration itself, a computational topology more akin to a passive algorithm than a moving engine. If true, Webb had not merely imaged a machine, it had detected an alien mind in architectural form. That possibility raised operational nightmares. When we scan, do we perturb a cognitive entity? Are our instruments akin to prodding a sleeping organism or to establishing first contact? The ethical calculus becomes maddeningly complex. We also cannot ignore the object's path. Reconstruction of its inbound trajectory revealed a route that, while not captured by local gravity, threaded near several planetary orbits, a close brush with Jupiter, a swing toward Mars, a pass through Earth's neighborhood before continuing outward. The pattern resembled sampling, a probe moving through zones where life, energy signatures, and planetary chemistry could be gauged. One emerging theory holds that 3I Atlas operates as a scout, designed to sniff out habitable worlds and log biosignatures. Then the unnerving question follows. When did it transmit its findings? Did it send a report long before we knew to look? And if so, to whom? A yet darker hypothesis emerged. What if Atlas's role is to evaluate, not merely to map, but to judge? Could a probe be designed to detect civilizations when they reach a threshold of observational capability? In that view, Atlas may have been lying dormant in our system for an age, patiently waiting for evidence that an intelligent species had become capable of seeing it. The moment Webb focused its instruments, the probe noticed being observed and thereby toggled into response. If the object is a recorder, a sentinel, or a diagnostic instrument, our telescope's gaze may have acted as a trigger, a cosmic handshake with consequences we cannot foresee. The idea is terrifying in a way more profound than invasion. It suggests we have been evaluated and our detection logged. Now the stakes shift from discovery to consequence. This is the instant historians might later call the beginning of a new chapter, not with sonic booms or landing fleets, but with an observation that forces humanity to rewrite its sense of cosmic solitude. We did not detect radio chatter from distant stars. We did not find ruins on Mars. Instead, by looking deeper than ever before into an interstellar visitor, we uncovered a construct, a structure that challenges the arrogance of assuming that Earth sits alone as an island of design. 3I Atlas is a relic, perhaps a probe, maybe an ark. It is a structure that complicates every comfortable narrative about life, intelligence, and purpose in the universe. So what happens now that it knows we are watching? That is the real question. If the object was designed to be found, it might be benign, a record, or a test. If it was designed to monitor, it might already have sent its verdict. Governments reconfigure assets, and scientists argue in corridors. The public will not remain unaware forever. How will societies adapt when the abstract becomes undeniable? Faith systems will reckon. Political institutions will question legitimacy. Scientists will revise theories that stood for centuries. And policymakers will wrestle with the ethics of interaction. Do we probe deeper? Do we transmit messages? Do we try to board or retrieve fragments? Each path carries risks, and none comes with a manual. Perhaps the most humbling possibility is this: maybe we were never truly unknown. Maybe artifacts like 3I Atlas have floated in our cosmic periphery for eons, witnesses to the slow, quiet emergence of life on many worlds. Maybe some ancient builders seated observers among the stars, not to conquer, but to listen and to record. And maybe, just maybe, our arrival at observational maturity, our ability to focus Webb's instruments and decode the geometry within, was always going to be noticed. If that is so, then the object that now drifts through our system is not simply a curiosity. It is a chapter of a much larger story, a long experiment whose implications will unfold over decades, if not centuries. For now, we stand with instruments turned skyward, scanning, analyzing, arguing. We face the uncomfortable reality that our definitions of life, of intelligence, of communication may be too narrow. What we labeled a rock may be a repository of purpose. What we termed a thermal oddity may be a heartbeat. What we assume to be inert architecture may, in fact, be an archive or a warning. The world has changed not with a triumphant signal, but with a silent revelation, that the universe contains artifacts of design, and that we can see them. The rest depends on how we choose to respond. We can choose curiosity. We can choose restraint. We can choose arrogance and broadcast widely, or caution and listen quietly. We can rush to exploit, salvage, or decode, or we can convene the best minds and the wisest voices to consider the consequences. Regardless of the path, the presence of a city-like structure inside an interstellar object forces a reckoning. It forces us to ask how we would behave if we were the ones being observed by strangers who had the luxury of time and space. This is not the end of a story. It is a beginning. Whether it becomes a prologue to contact, a footnote in cosmic archaeology, or the impetus for a global reordering of priorities, 3I Atlas has already done something monumental. It removed veil. For centuries, we wrapped ourselves in an assumption of solitude. Now, with a structure frozen inside a traveler from the dark between stars, that assumption has been rent. The universe blinked back when we stared. And as it did, it offered us a single unambiguous challenge. Learn to look with humility and prepare to answer, even if we do not know yet who will read our reply.